Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1190 and today's date is January 29th, 2017 and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Now before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I placed an interview on the X22 Report Spotlight. It is with Andrew Hoffman. So you can go to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight. It will bring you right to the video. Or you can come over to the X22Report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side. You'll see the video there. Or you can go to newssentinel.com. Same thing, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side, and you can play the video right on the site. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, last week we talked about how there were insiders leaving the stock market. About 100 million in personal stock holdings. Well, they were dumped by JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, etc. Now, Barron's, they detailed that it's not just the bankers that are bailing out of the U.S. stock market. The corporate elite and their mainstream media lackeys, well, they are also dumping stock. And they're getting out of the stock market. The massive spike in insider selling relative to buying is broad-based, and what we're seeing right now is that more and more of these insiders are getting out of the market. This is a classic bubble scenario. The market is driven up, the insiders profit on the top, they short it on the way down, and all the retail investors who think the market's going to continually move up, they are now purchasing stock. And we can see that this will not last because we can see from throughout history, as we move back in time, every time the market hits all-time highs, everyone thinks it's going to continually move up, and all of a sudden it just completely collapses. And this is exactly what we're going to see. We see that General Mattis, he was sworn in as the new U.S. Defense Secretary, and Trump signed a new executive order. The order is to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the U.S. And since he signed that, everything went haywire. By the way, safe zones were not included in this executive order. Now, I know the corporate media was playing it up, and we knew that this was part of the elite's plan. They wanted the safe zones. They wanted the no-fly zones. They wanted war with Russia. But again, this was not included. But since he signed the executive order, we see that protests all of a sudden started to appear out of nowhere, like on cue, as soon as the executive order was signed. We see banners and chants proclaiming build a wall, we'll tear it down, let them in, hey, hey, JFK, no more fascists, USA, and refugees in, racists out. And there were hundreds of protesters assembled at JFK Airport. They were also in Chicago O'Hare. And this was all because of what Donald Trump did. President Trump, I should say. He signed the executive order. But then we have to look a little bit closer at how did these protests begin. Now, it wasn't like there were millions of people. There were 500, 1,000, 1,500 people out there. And the Council of American Islamic Relations, also known as CAIR, has helped launch a series of protests across the country and plans lawsuits related to Trump's recent executive orders on immigration. Now, the orders are designed to keep Americans safer from terrorism. Remember, the U.S. government, the central bankers, they spent many, many years since 2001 telling us that terrorists are coming to get us. First it was Al-Qaeda, then the Islamic State appeared in 2014 and told us all to be afraid, and then they had those fake videos of the beheadings, and they were out there continually telling us that the Islamic State was coming to get us. So Trump is playing on this, and he is out there saying, okay, then we need to keep America safe from these terrorists. But we know that terrorists are controlled, created, supported by the neocons, by the central bank, by those individuals who are not elected, who are really controlling and calling the shots right now. So we can see that he put a temporary ban on Iraq, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, Libya, and Sudan. And he banned them from entering the U.S. without extreme vetting and banning refugees from these countries for at least 30 days. Now, when we look at this group, the Council of American Islamic Relations, well, they helped fund the Women's March. This was also part of Soros. And we can see that this was all created to go against whatever Trump is doing. And if you notice, every time that Trump does something, the opposition, the corporate media, really preys upon this. And we can see that they're continually doing this. Now, since Trump came out with his executive order, we see a federal judge, Judge Ann Donnelly in the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn, issued an emergency stay halting the Trump's executive order banning immigrants from 7 of the Muslim countries. So we can see right now she said that this is going to cause an irreparable harm to the country, and she placed this stay. Now, the court rulings was in response to a petition filed on Saturday morning by the ACLU on behalf of the 2 Iraqi men who were initially detained at JFK. Now, these individuals were released. They were allowed into the country. And what we're seeing right now is they're doing whatever they possibly can to stop this. Now, the stay only covers the airport detainees and those currently in transit and does not change the ban going forward. Now, they were interviewing the individual, Hamid Khalid Darwish. He's an Iraqi interpreter. And they were asking him questions. What do you think of America? He said, I think America is the greatest country. And then they asked him about Donald Trump. Do you like Donald Trump? And this is how that part went.
America is the greatest nation, the greatest people in the world. I like him. Now, what's very interesting about all this is that when it aired on CNN, ABC, that part was completely cut out. Why? Because that didn't fit their narrative of the story. They didn't want that part in there. Now, Stefan Molyneux, who has a YouTube channel, he was talking about refugees resettling, and he made a great point that we need to look at the cost. And we know that the refugees are coming into the United States. We know that Obama, when he was president, he was bringing them in here. He said the cost of resettling about 10,000 refugees in the United States is quite expensive, because for the same cost, you can resettle 121,000 in the Middle East, and these individuals can stay in their country. Now, that's all great, but we need to think of, why are these refugees coming here to the United States? We need to go to the source of the problem. Because if we go backwards in time, before 2001, did we have this crisis? It wasn't that large, the crisis, and we have to go back even further than that. When we invaded, and I say we, I'm talking about the United States government central bankers, when they decided, something, we need to go into these 7 countries and we need to overthrow the ruling party, the elected party in these countries. And we need to place a puppet government in there and create war that will last 15, 20 years in this entire region to keep the central bankers' system alive. This is what created the refugee problem. Why is there a refugee problem in Syria? Because the elite, the U.S. government central banker, the globalists, well, they started a war in Syria. They pushed the war in Syria to get their gas pipeline, to remove Assad. Eventually, they were going to go into Iran. So if we look back at Libya, we look back at Lebanon, we look back at Yemen, what we see here is that there is constant war in these countries. Why? Because of the United States government, the central bankers, which are the elite, the neocons. They're the ones who created all this. Now, instead of putting Band-Aid fixes on all this and trying to, explain away and fight about all these refugees, why don't we go to the source of the problem? And you know what? Nobody is going to the source of the problem, because they don't want you to know what the real problem is. That's the whole point. Now, Homeland Security, Well, they're going to continue enforcing Trump's travel ban. And we can see right now there's a huge fight. Even though there's a stay from the federal judge, it looks like DHS is going to follow through. Now, CNN and the rest of the corporate media is out there, and they're pushing this quite hard, where the White House is looking to ask foreign visitors for their social media info and cell phone contacts. And the corporate media is out there making a very big deal about this, and they're pushing it very hard. Look what Trump is about to do. Well, we need to go back in time a little bit here. We need to understand what is really going on. Because if we go back in time, what do we see? Well, back in episode 1014, this was back in July 2016, Trump was not president yet, it was Obama. And what was happening at that time, and we reported on this in episode 1014, people who wanted to travel to the United States may soon have their Facebook profiles, cell phones, social media accounts vetted by the Department of Homeland Security before entering. Now, this was a proposed change to the Electronic System for Travel Authorization, ESTA, and to Form I-94W, and this was posted to the government's Federal Register, and it said, please enter information associated with your online presence. Now, this is what was happening back then. And what we saw was that, yes, The Guardian reported this. Their headline was, U.S. government collecting social media information from foreign travelers. We even have CNN reporting on this back in September 21st of 2016. And their headline was, note to all visitors, the Department of Homeland Security wants to follow you on Twitter. They want your social media information. They want your cell phone information. And when we look at the article, it says U.S. Customs and Borders Protection Agency wants to add social media information to the form for travelers, which they did. Now, did they make a really big deal about this? Did they say, oh my God, look what's happening here? No. It was downplayed because who was president? Obama. So this was not started with Trump. This is a continuation of what was done under the Obama presidency. But they didn't mention that. So this is, again, where they're taking what already happened and placing it under Trump because it fits their fake news story of what is really happening. So we see right now that they weren't making a big deal. There weren't protests at that time. People, no one said anything. And now all of a sudden, everyone's up in arms, and it's on the front page of CNN now. Now, as part of the promise of Trump, where he said he was going to drain the swamp, well, Trump signed an ethics commitments executive order restricting his administration officials from working as lobbyists after they leave government. The order bans his appointees from lobbying any government official for 2 years and the agency they worked in for 5 years. It also prevents them from ever lobbying the U.S. on behalf of foreign governments or foreign political parties. The order is solely enforceable by the United States by any legal available means. Anyone found violating the ban would be barred from lobbying their former agency for up to another 5 years, on top of the 5-year period covered by the order. And what we've been seeing from Trump is that so far he's been following through on his campaign promises. And if we look back in time to other politicians who said they were going to follow through on their promises, they haven't. They followed up on some of them. But Trump is doing this within the first couple of days, weeks, as president. Now, of course, the elite, they do not like this. The corporate media, who's part of the elite system, the opposition, they are prepared and ready to fight this all the way. Because we know from the remarks of Soros, we know the remarks from John Kerry, we know the remarks from all these individuals, they are going to push this as hard as they possibly can. Because remember, there's a war going on between the truth and the lies that have been told throughout the years. And they don't want the truth coming out, because this is not going to be good for the central bank and the elite. Now we see U.S. commandos, they've launched a major raid on Al-Qaeda in Yemen, and what we're seeing right now, it looks like it's a mop-up operation in all of these areas where we have the commandos, the U.S. commandos, strategic forces going in and going into certain areas and cleaning up everything right now. Because Trump, well, he has given the Pentagon 30 days to develop a plan to defeat the Islamic State. Now, one of the plans should be, hey, let's join up with Russia. But of course, as we know, the NDAA from 2014 that was signed into law states that because of Ukraine, the U.S. cannot cooperate with Russia. So the NDAA needs to be revoked. That would be a good thing, because we also know that within that, it allows the government to put someone into prison without a trial. Now, we know this order about wiping out the Islamic State within 30 days. This is a problem for the elite, because it's not just the Islamic State, it's the terrorist groups, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Al-Sham. There are no moderate rebels. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard visited Syria and said she couldn't find moderate rebels. All she saw were terrorists, paid mercenaries, running around committing these horrific acts. And we know right now by Trump doing this, well, the elite, they're backed into a corner, because most likely Trump is going to work with Putin. Now, Trump and Putin, they had their first phone call. They were talking about joining forces to get the Islamic State. We're going to have to see how Trump gets around the NDAA 2014. But we can see right now, this is the plan. And the elite, they're not going to like this plan, because we know they created them, they support them, they use them to create this illusion that terrorists are coming to get the American people. Now, there are reports that Russia, well, they're bringing equipment back into Syria, and the Russian media claim that that Russia has deployed the Ka-52 advanced combat helicopters, the Su-25 attack aircraft, and they're bringing it back to Syria. So we'll have to see what is going on there, because the reason they're most likely bringing it back, because the elite, they might be planning something in this area. They're still trying to reach their goal to remove Assad. Now we see security forces in Iraq, in Mosul. Well, they discovered mustard gas, agents, and other chemical weapons in a chemical laboratory concealed in this area. Now, once again, we are finding chemical weapon lab run by the terrorist groups in many different areas. In Iraq, in Syria. And this should tell the world it is the paid mercenaries that are using these chemical weapons. How much more evidence do we need to prove that it's not Assad, but it is the paid mercenaries, the terrorists that the United States government central bankers are using to overthrow Assad, to cause havoc in these countries? Because lately, they've been finding a lot of these chemical weapons labs where they're creating it and using it on the people of these countries. Now, in past reports, we talked about a war. Now, yes, the elite are trying to gin up a war with China, with Iran. They're looking at Trump's weak areas, playing upon them, most likely going to try to force him into doing something, or having these countries do something. But they're trying to create tension. And there is a war coming. And it's not just between the United States government and China or Russia, where the elite are trying to gin up this war. The war is coming between Trump and the elite, the central bank. Because we have to remember something very important here. Yes, Trump is the president, but the control is still left with the central bank, the Federal Reserve, those who are hiding behind the curtain, the non-elected leaders. And no matter what Trump does, they still pull the strings. They still hold all the keys. They control the monetary system. They can make the system work. They can make it come down anytime they want. And there is a war coming between Trump and these elite. And we're seeing it happen right now, where they're butting heads. And what that tells us is they're going to make his presidency as tough and rough as possible, and most likely bring down the economy under him. Most likely he has plans to counter this, but we can see right now there's a huge battle raging, and this is just the beginning. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.